Ladies and gentlemen, let's clear up one of the laziest cliches in economics. You've heard it before. Japan collapsed because of the Plaza Accord in 1985. Ah, yes, the moment America and Europe politely asked Japan to stop cheating at Monopoly with its super cheap yen. But here's the problem. Blaming the Plaza Accord for Japan's decline is like blaming your divorce on the wedding photographer. Sure, he caught you with spinach in your teeth, but maybe the real issue was that your spouse hated you. Americans love that story because it's simple. We told Japan to revalue its currency, and boom, their economy tanked. It makes America look powerful, Japan look tragic, and economics look like a Marvel movie where one policy paper saves or destroys the world. But here's the spoon-fed truth. Japan's stagnation had less to do with Plaza Accord and more to do with decades of political cowardice and magical thinking. Enter Shinzo Abe. Yes, Japan's longest-serving prime minister. The man with a plan, called Abenomics. 3 arrows: fiscal stimulus, monetary easing, and structural reform. Sounds impressive, right? Except only 2 arrows ever left the bow. The third, structural reform, never existed. Abe basically said, "Don't worry, guys, I'll fix Japan's economy by printing monopoly money and building some bridges." And the world cheered. The IMF applauded. American journalists wrote breathless articles about Japan's revival. Meanwhile, Japanese wages stayed flat, young people gave up on marriage, and convenience store clerks in their 60s became the new middle class. So today, let's bury the myth once and for all. Japan wasn't killed by the Plaza Accord. Japan killed itself by buying into Abenomics, a policy cocktail mixed with optimism, denial, and just enough sake to keep voters drunk until the next election. Stay tuned, because Chapter 1 is where we dismantle the Plaza Accord fairy tale, spoon-fed American style. Okay, class, let's start with the bedtime story Americans love to tell themselves about Japan. Once upon a time, there was a magical thing called the Plaza Accord. The US and its buddies forced Japan to make the yen stronger, and poof, Japan's economy died. Sounds dramatic, right? Like the CIA flew into Tokyo, flipped a currency switch, and boom, Japanese businessmen were selling their golf clubs at pawn shops. But let's be real, the Plaza Accord didn't kill Japan. It just gave Japan a mild headache. The real hangover came later, when Japanese policymakers decided the cure for every problem was more booze. Here's the spoon-fed version. In 1985, the dollar was too strong, Japan's exports were too cheap, and the US was tired of losing its shirt buying Toyotas. So Washington called a meeting in the fancy Plaza Hotel in New York and said, "Guys, let's push the yen up." Japan agreed. The yen doubled in value, and Americans stopped panicking about Honda's taking over Detroit. Did Japan face pressure? Sure. But did the yen's rise automatically destroy the world's second largest economy? Not quite. What really happened was that Japan's leaders freaked out. They were terrified that a stronger yen would hurt exports, so the Bank of Japan slammed the gas pedal on cheap money. Interest rates cut, loans everywhere. Real estate skyrocketed. And thus was born Japan's biggest monster, the asset bubble. So the Plaza Accord didn't murder Japan. At best, it was the guy at the bar who said, "One more round won't hurt you." The real culprit was Japan's own decision to drown itself in easy money, fake growth, and a property bubble so insane that for a brief moment, Tokyo Land was worth more than California. But remember, Americans love simple fairy tales. So they keep blaming the Plaza Accord because it's easier than saying Japan sabotaged itself. So after the Plaza Accord, Japan panicked and did what every bad economist does when scared. It opened the money faucet and let it gush. Picture the Bank of Japan as a bartender shouting, "Drinks are on me." Mortgages, corporate loans, real estate speculation, it all flowed like sake at a wedding. And oh boy, did people drink. Office clerks were buying condos like baseball cards. Banks were handing out cash to anyone with a business plan scribbled on a napkin. Tokyo land prices shot so high that for one shining moment, the Imperial Palace grounds were said to be worth more than the entire state of California. Let me repeat that slowly for American viewers. A single patch of land in Tokyo was allegedly worth the whole Golden State. That's not economics, that's hallucination. Then came the inevitable. In the early 1990s, the bubble popped. Real estate prices crashed, stock markets tumbled, and suddenly the mighty salarymen of Japan were left holding worthless assets and massive debts. The party was over. But instead of cleaning up the mess, Japan invented something special: zombie banks. Now, zombies in America are scary because they eat people. Zombies in Japan were scarier because they ate capital. These were banks stuffed with bad loans, too weak to lend, too cowardly to die. The Ministry of Finance refused to shut them down, preferring to prop them up with taxpayer money and endless denial. The result? A whole decade, actually several, of stagnation. Japan called it the lost decade. Americans called it proof that you should never trust sushi with mayonnaise on it. But here's the kicker. This zombie policy mindset didn't vanish. It just evolved. Years later, Shinzo Abe's Abenomics repeated the same trick. Flood the system with money, pretend it's growth, and hope voters don't notice wages never rise. So no, the Plaza Accord didn't destroy Japan, the bubble did, and the zombies kept it that way. After the bubble collapse, Japan needed a leader with guts, brains, and vision. Instead, it got Junichiro Koizumi, a man with a rock star haircut and the reform depth of a motivational poster in an HR office. Americans loved him, of course. He looked like a samurai version of Mick Jagger, talked about reform, and even sent Japanese troops to Iraq just to look cool. CNN ate it up. But let's spoon-feed the truth. Koizumi's so-called structural reforms were less about fixing Japan's problems and more about making Wall Street clap. Privatize the postal service, deregulate, cut fat. It all sounded bold. But in practice, what did it mean? It meant creating a two-tier economy, a shrinking group of full-time workers and a growing underclass of disposable temps, contractors, and part-timers. By the mid-2000s, Japan's miracle recovery was basically a PowerPoint illusion. Wages were flat. Job security was gone. Young people were shuffled into unstable work, while corporations padded their books. To Americans, Koizumi looked like a reform hero. To Japanese workers, he was the guy who replaced your career with a convenience store uniform. And yet, here's the kicker. Shinzo Abe later took this broken system and said, yes, more please. Instead of tackling the hard stuff, like labor market reform, female participation, or actually raising wages, Abe doubled down on monetary stimulus and PR campaigns. Abenomics was marketed as 3 arrows: fiscal spending, easy money, and structural reform. Spoiler, only the first 2 ever showed up. The third arrow, the one that mattered, was imaginary. Koizumi lit the fire. Abe roasted marshmallows on it. And American journalists nodded approvingly, writing editorials about revival, while ignoring that Japan's younger generation was quietly drowning in precarious work and hopelessness. So if the Plaza Accord was the wrong suspect, and the bubble burst was the crime scene, then Koizumi was the flashy lawyer distracting the jury. He sold the world a Japan that looked reformed but was quietly hollowed out, setting the perfect stage for Abe to strut in with his economic cosplay. Now let's talk about Shinzo Abe, Japan's economic savior, at least according to every glowing New York Times op-ed and every IMF PowerPoint with a sakura blossom on the cover. Abenomics was sold like the iPhone of economic policies: sleek branding, catchy name, 3 arrows. But spoiler alert, the phone didn't come with a charger, and 2 of the apps never worked. The first arrow? Fiscal stimulus. Translation: spend big on construction projects, bridges to nowhere, and more concrete poured on Japan's already over-concreted riversides. Did it create lasting growth? No. But hey, it gave rural voters some shiny new highways. The second arrow, monetary easing. In other words, print money like it's going out of style, flood the markets with yen, push interest rates so low that even your piggy bank would start charging you rent. Stock markets loved it. Asset managers loved it. Ordinary Japanese workers? Not so much. Their wages didn't rise, their grocery bills did, and young people still couldn't afford families. And the third arrow? Structural reform. Ah yes, the arrow that never left the quiver. Abe promised deregulation, labor reform, female empowerment. What Japan got was a PR campaign called Womenomics, posters about women shining, cute slogans. Meanwhile, actual female participation remained stunted, childcare stayed inadequate, and women kept being funneled into low-paid temp jobs. It was like painting empowerment on a Hello Kitty lunchbox and calling it progress. The tragic part is that the world bought it. Western economists lined up to praise Abe as a visionary. But inside Japan, people joked that the 3 arrows were really just 3 chopsticks. Flimsy, mismatched, and utterly useless against the monster of demographic decline and wage stagnation. So here's the truth. Abenomics wasn't a cure. It was a stage play. A tragic comedy where Abe played the hero, the audience clapped politely, and ordinary Japanese were left paying the ticket price long after the curtain fell. Imagine the Bank of Japan as a desperate magician who's already pulled every rabbit out of his hat. Interest rates slashed to zero, quantitative easing done to death, negative rates. Sure, why not? Let's start charging savings accounts rent. By the mid-2010s, the BOJ wasn't managing an economy. It was running a circus act with counterfeit money and hoping nobody in the audience noticed the tent was on fire. And then came the yen collapse. Once upon a time, the Japanese yen was a fortress. Investors saw it as safe, solid, unshakable. Today, it's a meme. The currency's been so devalued that tourists joke you can buy half of Tokyo with a Starbucks gift card. For ordinary Japanese workers, this wasn't funny at all. Import prices skyrocketed, energy bills spiked, groceries ate more of their shrinking paychecks. Real wages fell so far you'd need scuba gear to find them. Now here's where it gets tragicomic. When your economy won't pay you, you start looking elsewhere. And Japanese women, stuck with low wages and no opportunities, increasingly turned outward. Some went abroad as hostesses or cultural entertainers, a polite euphemism in government paperwork for sex work. Others headed to Korea and China, marrying men who, irony of ironies, offered more stability than Japan's eternal bachelor class of underemployed salarymen. Think about that for a second. The country that once terrified Asia with its economic might is now exporting its women, not its technology. In Seoul, the running joke is that Japan's best trade surplus isn't cars anymore, it's brides. But don't expect Tokyo's policymakers to admit this collapse of dignity. No, they're too busy holding press conferences about revitalization, while ignoring that real revitalization is happening across the Sea of Japan, with Japanese women leaving their homeland for someone else's. So here we are, the yen in freefall, wages in decline, women escaping, and the BOJ doubling down on the same magic tricks. Welcome to Japan's apocalypse. Polite, quiet, and painfully slow. Let's wrap this up with the simplest spoon-fed conclusion an American audience could ask for. The Plaza Accord was not the crime scene. It was just the warm-up act. The real killer wore a suit, smiled politely, and called himself Shinzo Abe. Think about it. The Plaza Accord happened in 1985. That's 40 years ago. If Japan's stagnation were purely about that, it would have bounced back decades ago, the way other nations did after currency shocks. Germany, Korea, even Mexico took hits and recovered. Japan? It turned its one-time lost decade into a permanent lifestyle. Like a college kid who never graduates, Japan decided to major in excuses. Abenomics was supposed to be the comeback album. Instead, it was karaoke. 3 arrows? Try 3 Nerf darts, fired at the wall while the economy bled out. Fiscal spending, concrete. Monetary easing, money printing Olympics, structural reform, a ghost arrow that Abe talked about but never fired. And while Western media applauded this kabuki performance, Japanese workers saw their wages shrink, their future disappear, and their daughters pack their bags for Seoul or Shanghai. The tragedy here isn't just economic, it's cultural. Japan once terrified the US with talk of Japan as number one. Today, its main export is not innovation or influence, but people. Women leaving to marry abroad, men retreating into basements with anime pillows, workers too exhausted or underpaid to raise families, and a political class too cowardly to tell the truth. Japan sabotaged itself. So the next time someone says, "Oh, Japan fell because of the Plaza Accord," just laugh. That's like saying the Titanic sank because the champagne was too bubbly. The iceberg was homegrown. Its name was denial, and Abe's Abenomics made sure Japan sailed straight into it, smiling all the way down. So here we are, ladies and gentlemen. After 40 years of excuses, let's put the myth to bed. Japan wasn't destroyed by the Plaza Accord. It was destroyed by itself. By cowardly politicians, zombie banks, concrete obsession, and finally, Shinzo Abe's tragic cosplay called Abenomics. The story is almost poetic. The world once feared Japan would buy Rockefeller Center, dominate Silicon Valley, and replace the American dream with a Sony Walkman. Today, Japan can't even replace its fluorescent light bulbs without a government subsidy. Its wages are stuck at 1997 levels, its youth are allergic to marriage, and its currency has been demoted from safe haven to cheap souvenir. And here's the real kicker for Americans watching: don't flatter yourselves. The Plaza Accord wasn't some masterstroke of US economic dominance. It was just one chapter in a very long novel of Japanese self-sabotage. If anything, Japan did America a favor. It volunteered to be the cautionary tale. It showed the world what happens when a country refuses structural reform, clings to denial, and elects leaders who sell slogans instead of solutions. Meanwhile, the fallout is human, not just financial. Japanese women leave to find futures abroad. Men retreat into convenience store jobs and escapist fantasies. Politicians keep promising growth tomorrow while quietly managing decline today. This isn't an economic cycle, it's a cultural choice, a slow suicide with PowerPoint slides. So next time someone tells you Japan's downfall was all America's fault, or the Plaza Accord killed them, just smile and say, no, Japan killed Japan. Because the truth is harsh, but also simple. The Plaza Accord was an event, Abenomics was a disease, and the cure? Well, Japan's still waiting for that arrow to be fired. Don't hold your breath. Mic dropped. Curtain closed. Welcome to the slow-motion tragedy called modern Japan.